Okay, we'll call this special meeting to order for the purpose of request for a police lieutenant promotional exam. It's 8:04. Shannon, would you call and roll, please?
Mr. Jasny?
Here.
Mr. Neese?
Here.
Mr. Leonard? Mr. Taylor? Okay.
Absent. Okay. Based upon a special meeting, I see Matt out there for public participation or for all business. Matt, do you have something to say before we get into the request for the police exam?
Yes.
Any objections? Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Matthew Pfeiffer. As you may know, I'm one of the elected representatives of the Twinsburg Police Patrol Officers Union. I'm here today to address something that was discussed at the previous meeting regarding an amendment to the civil service rules and regulations regarding the calculation of seniority points for promotional exams. I know that's not on today's agenda, but I'm not sure if I'm able to make it to the regular meeting, so I will address it today. I was a little disappointed when I heard this topic come up again. I'd like to remind the Commission that after much discussion, it decided not to take action on the proposed amendment at the May 16, 2019 meeting. The Commission at that time rejected the proposed amendment after I presented evidence of it disproportionately and negatively affecting every officer with less than 10 years of experience, creating an instance in which an officer with less than 10 years of experience could score 15 points higher than an officer with almost 20 years of experience and still be lower in rank. Using the data from the then current police sergeant promotional list, I showed Commission that the proposed amendment disproportionately affected officers with less than 10 years of seniority at a rate more than double that of officers with more seniority. The amendment would effectively make it almost mathematically impossible for an employee with less than 10 years of seniority to rank in the top 5 against more senior employees. During the original discussion, Assistant Chief Goncheski provided the opinion that the current language didn't need change, and if it did, the city would need to come up with a process that was fair and doesn't unequally change someone's score. And as far as the lieutenant's promotional exam on this morning's agenda, with the appointment of Chief Mason, we've reached a crossroads that I warned the Commission about months ago, that being key leadership positions within the department that continue to be vacant and create a lack of chain of command. With the swearing in of Chief Mason tomorrow, the police department will no longer have any lieutenants. The patrol officers believe these positions need filled immediately and are not opposed to an expedited promotional process so long that it is fair and objective. I strongly agree with Mr. Brown's assessment that all applicants for the chief's positions show strong leadership abilities, and we need to get these people into those vacant key leadership positions immediately. To that end, and not knowing what is going to be further discussed today, it's my personal opinion that we got to delay this process any further. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Paul?
You have to be a sergeant. I'm not familiar with your contract. Do you have to be a sergeant to take the lieutenant's promotion? So there are 4 people eligible, right?
There will
Okay.
There are currently 3. There will be 4, I believe, sometime in October.
Okay. That's it.
Thank you, Matt.
Can I just ask, just from a clarification standpoint, with the, Pfeiffer talked about how there was this disproportionate, we had talked as a commission, as a body, that since you have to have 5 years to sit for the sergeant's exam, everybody is getting those percentages for the first 4 years anyway. It's automatic. So do you have your math that you can submit to the commission so they can have that information? Thanks.
You never got one. Do you need one again?
Sure. If you have an extra. Thank you.
Anything further? Thank you very much, Matt. Being a special meeting, we'll forego the old business and get right into the request for a police lieutenant exam, promotional exam.
Thank you, Mr. Sonia. So, with the, our last meeting, we did go ahead and request and get approval for the sergeant's exam. With there now, our current lieutenant, Lieutenant Mason, being sworn in as chief on tomorrow, we now have, or will have very shortly, an opening for a lieutenant. And so that is the purpose of today's meeting, is to move forward with preparing to post and make way for a lieutenant's exam.
Now, are we going to go through the normal procedures for the lieutenant exam, or are we going to, as Matt said, expedite it where there can be, temporary appointments or emergency appointments to fill the ranks?
I guess I would have to defer to Lieutenant Mason. So, Lieutenant Mason, you want to step up?
And just before that, I'm just, Joe, just curious if we talked about there's 4 possible candidates, and depending on the number of vacancies filled, how do we do that without some sort of mechanism to be able to evaluate those folks?
Well, I was just reading in the charter about it, emergency appointments and temporary appointments. Well, Mr. Brown, would your opinion be for how long a lieutenant's promotional exam would take from start to finish?
I mean, so it all depends on the mechanism that the new chief, as of tomorrow, decides to use. So if there's a mechanism that they have to have study materials, he chooses to use study materials, and we leave that up to the chiefs to decide on those particular exams, then we are 60 days out per contract, period. No explanation, no emergency appointment. We're 60 days out because they have to have 60 days to review and study materials before the exam. That in and of itself puts us into November. Any other mechanism, again, is chosen by whoever chosen by Chief Mason as of tomorrow. Lieutenant Mason, excuse me, as of tomorrow when he becomes chief, needs to be scheduled out depending on what that mechanism is. So previously, they have, from my understanding, used policy, procedures, and protocols for promotional exams. Again, that was coming study materials as those policies, procedures from the police department were used as part of the test. So that, again, that puts us 60 days out. If we use Bradco, it's a matter of contacting Bradco, going through the assessment process, creating something with Larry. That puts us at least 30 days out. So, I mean, we're into October. Either way we go at this point, especially since we're going to have the sergeant's exam that will come up the week of the 20th. That's going to be posted. That will not use any study materials. Chief NOAA decided to use National Testing Network as the testing mechanism for the sergeant's promotion. So, long answer to your question, but I think we're at least 30 days out anyway, even with the lieutenant.
Thank you. Lieutenant Mason?
Morning. Right now, my preferred course or process for the promotion would be Bradco. Something along that lines, assessment.
And Cradco would be the 60 days.
30 days at least.
Oh, 30 days,
At
okay.
least 30 days, correct.
Okay.
We could expedite it. Originally, there was talk of the lieutenant's test being held sometime in November. We could get it done in October. At that time, it would allow all 4 sergeants who would be eligible. Give you a bigger pool of candidates. My understanding is months and months ago, there was talk amongst the sergeants of who would be eligible when. They had approached the mayor, and at that time it was decided that it would be pushed back into the fall, at which time all 4 candidates would be eligible.
And you're comfortable with this procedure and time frame as far as, when you...
I see.
So there's no written, there's just gonna be an assessment center?
Yes, there is a online portion, there is some writing involved in it, but essentially it's an assessment, yes. Yeah, and one of the big pros of Bradco is they test you on emotional and leadership indexes, but it's not just a test. There's an evaluation that comes along with it. Each candidate sits down with Bradco, somebody from Bradco. There's a thorough review and evaluation, so it's a developmental tool as well. Any areas that it looks like they may be deficient, they point that out, talk about ways of improving in those areas. So it's a good process.
Mr. Brown, would you be able to, or maybe Mr. Maestros, check whether a commissioner representative could be in with Pratco for these assessments? Is it necessary or beneficial?
Well, necessary or beneficial is different than whether or not Bradco, Bradco is more of a science-based. They evaluate everything, every movement, every action, every response, every head nod. I mean, I don't know that they wouldn't allow
Okay.
anybody outside, even Mr. Brown or anybody else. We've never had that, but we can ask that question.
I mean, we wouldn't interfere. It'd just be for the sake of having some representation for that officer from the commission, that's all.
Representation for the office.
Well, I'm not, okay, that was bad wording, I said it was wrong. Just basically there, so we have an idea of how this assessment is handled. So if we're ever questioning about it, we have some insight as to, okay, this is what, evolved, and, these are the men that were chosen.
Sure, we can ask.
Just a thought. Anything else? Thank you very much, and congratulations, by the
Thank you.
way. So, Mr. Brown,
Yes, sir.
we're going to proceed with the promotional exam.
Yes, sir. So
Do we need a motion for
Yes.
that? Okay.
I'm not, I guess I'm not 100% clear. You need 60 days,
Only if there are study materials.
so you're shortcutting, you're basically shortcutting this
So
process.
we're shortening the process by Lieutenant Mason choosing not to use an exam that will have study materials included. So we're shortening that process, but we're still looking at least 30 days to sit down with Bradco to create the assessments. I mean, Bradco does not, from my understanding, they have template assessments around, but you still have, Lieutenant Mason will have to sit down with Bradco rep and put together what that assessment looks like according to what they have and their needs, and what they will assess. We've done Bradco before with several other high-level positions here at the city, and most recently just used it as well, which I thought came out very well. So they do, as Mr. Maestro said, they do a lot of scientific analysis, but they get down to quote unquote the nitty gritty of a person moving into a key leadership role such as this. So there's several different assessments included into one. That's why in our last meeting we talked about Bradco a little bit in just regards to how we move with Bradco and how expensive they are. But we got to that discussion in our last meeting. So
But you didn't use Pratco for the chief, did you?
we did not use Bradco for the chief.
Anything else?
I don't think so.
Well, then I'd like to make the motion that we proceed with the, Mr. Brown to go ahead and prepare the Pratco examination for the lieutenant's position.
Second?
So,
I'm not sold on shortcutting this. Sorry. What happens now?
Well, can you second the motion if you want to have any further discussion, and then we'll take a vote.
Sure, I'll second the motion.
Okay, now if you want to discuss more, you can.
Having a second, do we have a question on the motions?
I'm not sure shortcutting the process is the best way to go. I just don't know enough about it.
Paul, can you sit up and speak in the mic? Thank you.
Sorry.
It's okay.
If I could speak, shortcutting may not be the best term or phrase for this. 60-day notices, typically, you've been through tests as all of us have. Typically, if there's any outside material required, I've been through them where there's been 2, 3, 4 outside required sources reading material, typically books, management books, things like that, that you have to read and test them. The 60 days is to allow for, once those are received, and distributed to everybody, that they have time to review them. Okay? With Pradco, much like when we did the chief, it's an assessment. So there's no outside material required. There's really no preparation that the candidates can do. That's why with this process, as I said, we've used it before. I've been through it. Multitude of the officers have been through Pradco at one time or another. So I don't think you can really look at it as shortcutting. The fact that you can't prepare because it's like the old was it MMPI. Yeah, it's kind of, you can't prepare for that, right? It's what's in you that they look at, that they evaluate, and that's what Pradco does. There are certain leadership and emotional indexes that they look for, based on what the city wants as far as the leader in that position. So they do a variety of testing, interviewing exercises, things like that, to establish your index. And then that's what's scored, that's what's evaluated. So there really is no way to prepare for it. That's why you don't meet in 60 days. I think that the time it's going to take to get with Pradco, set it up, the fact that we do have a service test coming up next month, realistically, we'd only be moving with that timeline a couple weeks at best. So I don't think it would have any adverse effect at all. I know that just having gone through the process and knowing that there really is no way to prepare for it. So I don't know if that clarifies anything for you or answers any of your questions.
It does a little bit.
So we're not really looking to bypass or get around anything. It's just we don't have to wait 60 days because you can't prepare for it.
I mean, the reality of it
Thank
is 60 days from today is November 2nd. We're talking mid-October before we can actually probably get this scheduled and I mean, probably talking 2 weeks, and it might be later. I don't know what Pradco's schedule is. We haven't even talked to them.
Right.
I mean, they might be, we're at least mid-October before we could actually get it scheduled on the books with them anyway. So I'm talking about a 2-week difference, but whatever the commission decides, but it's really 60 days from today is November 2nd or mid-October. We're not talking about doing this next week or end of the month. We just can't pull that off.
Thank you.
Any other questions, sir? Thank you.
Thanks, Lieutenant.
Any other further questions? Having heard discussion and motion on the floor, do I have vote, please?
Roll. Mr. Jasny?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes 2-0.
Okay. Again, being this is a special meeting, Chief, you're just visiting, right? Okay. All right. I'll make a motion that the meeting adjourn.
Who's second?
8:25.
Mr. Jasny?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Okay.
Next meeting will be I believe that's a Wednesday, right? September 8th.
Yes, and 8:30.
8:30.
8:30.
Thank you all for attendance.